everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and before we continue with Pirkei Dor Eliezer, I want to thank you all for your patience. I know I haven't been here for a while, kind of been going through this thing, been sick, getting over it, tail end, very gross and everything, but thank you for your prayers and for your well wishes and all that good stuff. I really did appreciate seeing those messages. They kind of filled me up with warmth, so thank you for that. Without further ado, let's get into it. So we are in chapter 48. This is 48e. This one is called, For If You Improve, You Will Ascend. Hallelu et Adonai kol goyim, shabechu kol ha'umim, ki gavar alenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai le'olam, hallelujah. So, and we're continuing from the last one. So when Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh and said to him from Exodus 5:1, so said God, the God of Israel, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the four-letter name of God, send out my people and let them celebrate to me in the desert. I don't know what the English translation uses there with the word celebrate, but I've seen sacrifice and I've seen work, right? But the word in Hebrew is vayachogu, which comes from the root word chag. Chag is a chag Purim, chag Chanukah. Chag is it's a holiday, but it's also a lachgog, celebration, right? It's a celebratory thing. It's not okay and sacrifices, and it's actual joy. The entire, you do it Hashem b'simcha, you should do God's work with love and with joy because you are privileged to do it for the creator of all things. So that's what it says. Come, let's have a party in the desert, right? Chagiga, celebration. But it means all of the above, really. As to give God an offering is understood to be it's an incredible experience, right? You are clean after that. As you just did the work to please the creator by rectifying creation. That's the purpose of creation, is to rectify it. So Pharaoh said to them in verse 2, and Pharaoh said, who is the Lord? He said specifically, who is this Yud Kei Vav Kei, that I should hear his voice to let Israel out? I do not know this Yud Kei Vav Kei, neither will I let Israel out. Now, again, the English says the Lord, but the Hebrew has the four-letter name of God, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, like we said, that was only revealed for the first time in history to Moses at the burning bush, no more than 3 months before this encounter with Pharaoh. Vayomer Paro, mi Adonai, who is this? I don't know this. I have no idea who this is. And again, God said this is when it was revealed for the first time. When we read Genesis and you see the four-letter name of God and God spoke, it doesn't mean that they knew where necessarily this was coming from. God is both the author and also he's telling the story from the third person. And Yud Kei Vav Kei said. Okay, we get that. So, how do we know this, that this is the first time? The Torah tells us clearly in Exodus 6:2-3. God spoke to Moses, and he said to him, I am the Lord. Ani Adonai, Yud Kei Vav Kei. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob with the name Almighty God. That's how it's poorly translated, but with the name El Shaddai. Ushmi, but my name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, lo nodati lahem. I did not become known to them. Period. No argument, that's it. In other words, this is the first time in the history of the world that this name was revealed, and it was revealed to Moses. Meaning, like we said, genuinely not known to Pharaoh or to anyone else in the world before it was revealed to Moses at that time. Most people get it wrong because we have the name all over the book of Genesis. Like we said, speaking to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, they answer to the four-letter name. But that gives us the specific name so we, the reader, understand what's going on behind the scenes. Like we said, there's a name of mercy, there's a name of judgment. This is for us to understand. And we just read that God did not reveal it before. So, how did the world know the Creator, and by what name? We know that the patriarchs also knew him by El Shaddai, as we just said. And also you could see that from the blessings of Jacob. But what was the primary name that they knew, that everyone knew? Genesis 41. So Pharaoh said to his servants, will we find anyone like this, referring to Joseph, a man in whom there is the spirit of Elohim. Elohim, that was a name known to the world, and that is the name of judgment. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since Elohim has let you know all this, there is no one as understanding and wise as you. You should be appointed over my household, and through your command all my people shall be nourished. Only with the throne will I be greater than you. So in other words, Pharaoh is recognizing Elohim and the power of Elohim, as he just said, and again, this is the ancient world, the known world. This guy Joseph, who has the spirit of Elohim, because of that he has given you wisdom and understanding. He recognizes Elohim, the creator. So again, Pharaoh and Egypt, they knew all about Elohim, right? The creator of the world, the destroyer of worlds, they knew him. That's the purpose of, the Tower of Babel. We want to build a tower so we could fight Elohim. So as we know, Elohim is the name of judgment by which the world was created from Genesis 1. This is the name that brought the flood. This is the name that the world chose to fight against in the Tower of Babel. I'm getting ahead of myself already. And this is the only name of the Creator known throughout the ancient world, so naturally Pharaoh would know it. Which is why when he spoke, that is the name that he used to Joseph. Yeah, Elohim. But now, right now in Exodus, though it was Pharaoh of the next generation, excuse me, or even 2 generations after that, do you think he would not know the God of Joseph and his father Jacob? The family that skyrocketed the Egyptian economy and status to the single most powerful empire in the world at that time. What, he wouldn't know? Of course he would have. After he made the true claim of not knowing the 4-letter name of God, then our text says, immediately Aaron tossed his staff before Pharaoh, and it became a nachash saraf, a seraph serpent. The verse says, thereupon Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. Ka'asher tziva Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Aaron cast his staff before Pharaoh and before his servant, and it became a serpent. Now, if you really want to get into the language over here, you're going to need to get the Hebrew next to the English. So at least you can see, so you could learn for yourselves, wherever it says God or the Lord or Almighty God, whatever the translations. Again, they're poor translations even in the Art Scroll. But if you have the Hebrew next to it, you could actually make a note what it is. So when you know what name that is, you know within what context it's speaking, you see? So again, for your guys' own sake, do this. I would strongly recommend. The Hebrew says tanin. So it says V'lifnei avadav vayhi tanin, and became a serpent. But it doesn't say nachash. It says tanin. Rashi says tanin is a serpent. So that's how it's translated, right? But it doesn't say serpent. So then why didn't it just say nachash, which could also be translated as a serpent? Because tanin could also be like a dragon. You understand? Going back to Genesis, taninim agdolim. So let's see the places where it refers to tanin and seraphim. Mind you, now seraphim is plural for seraph, one, right? The word seraph, though we know that there are, it's one of the many types of angels that there are, this is specifically a fire angel, though all angels are made up of air and fire, 2 out of the 4 elements. Human beings, the created, created with form, if you will, in this physical world, we have 4 elements because we are physical. But fire, look what it's doing. It touches everything, but you can't touch it. Same thing with air, with wind. But earth, you can touch. Water, you could touch. These 2 are tangible, and that's how we exist. Therefore, we are physical and also spiritual. So all angels by default, fire and wind. But these seraphim, they come from the name lisrof, to burn. Burning angels, if you will. Fire angels. Genesis 1:21, and God created the great sea monsters. Vayvareh Elohim, et hataninim hagedolim, the large taninim. Okay, hataninim hagedolim, poorly translated as great sea monsters. Why does it say sea monsters? Because they're talking about the day where all the fish and everything were created. So it kind of assumes, but again, it's also Mistranslation. In our earlier teachings in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, within the 6 days of creation, we discussed the opinions and possibilities of who these Taninim Agdolim are. Some say that it was Pharaoh and Nebuchadnezzar and Sennacherib and again, all these like Haman, all these great rulers throughout the world commanding kingdoms and empires that tried to destroy Israel, meaning in a negative way. Others say, again, in other opinions, they say that it was actually the patriarchs, the great monsters, if you will. Because of the power of the patriarchs, the world stands because of their merit. So, we got a lot of those. One of the opinions, like we said, it's also Nimrod, Pharaoh, Sennacherib, Nebuchadnezzar, Haman, Titus, Hadrian, those who attempted to destroy the world. And like we said, if Israel, who are the pinnacle of God's creation, is no more, then the world ceases to exist. One of the reasons Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says that the staff turned into a tanin is so Pharaoh should know that there is a God, the God of Israel above him, and he controls the situation. In other words, dude, I'm talking to you. You think you're a tanin? Here's what's going on. So, did it turn into a serpent? Yes. Why is it written tanin? So Pharaoh should understand. You see? Okay, I hope you see. As far as the seraphim and the serpents, we can see this in Numbers 20, verse 6. The Lord sent against the people, what does it say? Venomous snakes. What does it say in Hebrew? Hanechashim haseraphim. The serpents, the seraphim. You could say burning serpents because when they bite you, then their sting, the poison, it burns you like fire, right? But the more accurate interpretation, the venom actually refers to sin and death, how it infects the body, and so on and so forth. There are many different ways to look at it, and from our sages, none of them are wrong. They just give you a more complete picture, because it's not everything is one or two dimensional. We're talking about 70 faces of Torah over here. There's a lot to look at, and everything is just, and they're all related too. It's fascinating. So back to our text. After Aaron turned his staff into a nachash saraf, Pharaoh called his, not a nachash saraf, into a tanin, it says. But Pharaoh called his magicians, and they threw their staves on the ground, and they turned into nechashim seraphim. And Aaron's staff ran quickly, says our text, and swallowed their staffs, as said in Exodus 5:12. Each one of them cast down his staff, and they became serpents, but Aaron's staff swallowed their staff. Vayishlechu ish mateu vayihu letaninim. So here they are again, taninim. It does not say seraphim, nor does it say nechashim, serpents. It says taninim. Vayivla mate Aaron et matehu. And he swallowed their staff. He placed his hand in his bosom and removed it. And it was as white as snow from leprosy. And they also placed their hands in their bosom, and it was white as snow as leprosy. Why leprosy? Who was the leper? Pharaoh and all his people, in this case, according to PDE. When did this begin? When they began to turn on Israel. God was also showing Pharaoh who is responsible for his affliction and who can heal him. It all comes from God. So if you're thinking if the magicians could create and heal leprosy, why did they not heal Pharaoh? Well, because they couldn't. Their powers were superficial. Again, the dark side, the Sitra Achra, the other side. Of course, there's power over there. We have magicians. We see Bilam. It says that Bilam was higher in a sense than Moses based on his knowledge base, because Moses only used the side of good. Bilam only used the side of evil, but also had the possibility of using the side of good. Did Moses have the possibility of using the side of evil too? Of course, but because it was Moses, it wasn't even an option for him. Therefore, by default, if you want to say, he had these two options as to Moses is one option. Okay, so that's what we're talking about as far as the powers of dark magic go. Just like there is Ruach HaKodesh in the holy sense, those that are in idolatry and say, Holy Spirit talks to me. Yes, Spirit talking to you for sure. Not holy from the other side by default, because if you're in idolatry, nothing holy will come over there. Okay. So, like we said, they're parasuperficial, it's more of like a manipulation of matter, all falling into the realm of this world, still limited. But God doesn't have to manipulate anything, right? Everything he says already is. Everything was already created in the 6 days of creation. So what happened with the magicians who put leprosy on their own hands? Oh, look, we can do it too. You're going to love this. They couldn't remove it afterwards. As the Ramban Nachmanides said, that it remained there for the rest of their lives. They're like, that's not going to come off. And each and every plague that the Holy One, blessed be He, would bring upon the Egyptians in Egypt, they too would perform, until the Holy One, blessed be He, brought upon them boils, that they could not do so, as said in Exodus 9:11, and the necromancers could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils were upon the necromancers and upon all of Egypt. Literally, they could not stand on their feet, not only from the difficulty of the affliction, but also from shame. Yeah, we could do that. Come on, let's see. They were really big talkers. In the beginning, of course, making fun of Moses and his God. Oh, you don't want to do that, right? Not a great plan. Rabbi Akiva says the advisors of Pharaoh would choke Israel in the walls of the houses in between the bricks, and therefore they were screaming from within the walls, and the Holy One, blessed be He, heard their cries. As said in Exodus 2:24, God heard their cry, and God remembered His covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So if you're not aware of this, this was the final straw. What, God didn't hear all their affliction over the course of that 86-year period, 87-year period? Of course He did. But this was what brought about the Redeemer. The Israelites had to meet a quota, as we know, and when they didn't, there was hell to pay when it came to the building of the bricks with the Egyptians. And what was their job? What were they forced to do? Like we said, build bricks. When they could not produce enough bricks, the Egyptians would take the children and cement them into the walls of their idolatrous temples. They did this while the children were still alive. Whose cries did God hear? Now, the question, whose cries did God hear? The children's cries or the parents' cries? The parents, not the children. Here's why. Genesis 11. Now the entire earth was of one language and uniform words. And it came to pass, when they traveled from the east, or we've already been through that verse, that they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there, and they said to one another, this is obviously the Tower of Babel, come, let us make bricks and fire them thoroughly. Vayomu ish el re'ehu, re'ehu, my fellow. Hava, come now. Nilvena levenim venisrefa lisrefa. Fire them thoroughly. Nisrefa lisrof seraphim. See the burning? Okay. Nilbena, let us build. Livnot is to build. Nilbena, we come, let us build what? Levenim. So brick and build, you see, it's actually the same word. And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make ourselves a name, lest we be scattered upon the face of the entire earth. Just like the flood, right? The generation of the original Masons, Freemasons, yeah, the free ones, the builders began with the Tower of Babel. And they were later reincarnated in Egypt, this very same generation that Moses is dealing with right now. Not necessarily on the side of the Egyptians, but that of Israel as well. In other words, boom, that entire generation of all those people. The sparks transfer. These are called gilgulims, like reincarnations. It's not the entire consciousness of a person, but rather whatever needs to be there to serve its purpose. So how could this be? As we discussed, there is the spirit of the Erev Rav. Even today, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said this 1,000 times in the preface to the Zohar. He says in the last days, our days, all the leaders of Israel, he says, both political, rabbinical, everything, they are from the Erev Rav. I didn't say this. He said it. I believe what he says. Also, it makes sense. You could see. These people are born Jews. Jews, you could trace their bloodline, lineage, but their spirit, it is from the same ones who wanted to go against God over here. Okay? So, like we discussed. So our sages said not a single true Israelite child was harmed or killed. The ones that were put in the wall, their root was from the Erev Rav. Only those who came from the root of the Erev Rav, of the original builders, of the original ones who wanted to rebel against God, led by the one whose name is, we shall rebel, Nimrod. And this is their punishment. By the way, I told you this before. You have Israelis today who name their children Nimrod. Why don't they name their kids Adolf? You may as well. Nimrod's a lot worse, but okay. You guys wanted to build bricks in order to get to the heavens to fight God? Really? And so, in the most godly fashion, he deals with his creation measure for measure. Midah keneged midah. You did this, that's what you get. You said this, that's what you get. Exactly the same way with everyone. No one gets preferential treatment over here. It's important to remember. So now, you wanted to build those bricks to fight me. Now you yourselves will become these bricks. Excuse me. And God used that to both punish the perpetrators and arouse the cries of Israel to bring about the Redeemer, Moses. Everything serves a purpose. From our text, furthermore, they would burn their sons in the fiery furnace, as said in Deuteronomy 4:20. But the Lord took you out and brought you out of the iron crucible, out of Egypt, to be a people of his possession as of this day. Ve'etchem lakach Adonai, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Vayotze etchem, he took you out, mikur habarzel, the iron furnace, the iron crucible, from Egypt. So in other words, he's referring to Egypt as the iron crucible. Now, let's get into this because this is very interesting. Hence, come, let us make bricks and fire them thoroughly. Iron crucible in Hebrew is kul barzel. Now, there's a beautiful remez, there's a hint as to what went down in Egypt. What takes place inside a crucible, also known as a cauldron, aside from cooking, yes? It's a massive pot that can be heated up to extreme temperatures, and in it you can refine gold, silver, and even shape iron. Since the text says iron crucible, out of which we were pressed, squeezed, cooked, from that iron crucible rose a people, a nation to be God's personal possession. In other words, God is calling it a crucible because he needed to take whatever was there, trim the fat, if you will, which was apparently 80%, and what came out? God's people, worthy of now receiving the Torah. Excuse me. So the word barzel, iron, represents the four matriarchs, whose first letters of their names make up this indestructible substance known as iron in the biblical and spiritual sense. Yes? You have Bet for barzel. Bet is Bilha. Reish, Rachel, Rachel. Zain, Zilpa. Lamed, Leah. You see, now all four of them were necessary for creating Israel. Another way to look at this is also to go back to the generation of dispersion as Abraham was around and he was cursing them at the time they were building the tower. We also learned about this in the earlier chapters. After the collapse and dispersion, Nimrod threw Abraham, tossed him right into the fiery furnace, and God, of course, saved him. Now, I'm sure this whole situation might feel a bit strange, but this is one of the many methods that God uses to both save one side and exact justice and judgment upon the other simultaneously. And the most classic example of this is Ishmael, whose name literally means God will hear. Ishma will hear El, God. God will hear. So, will God hear Ishmael's cries? No. This name was a title. It's like a job description. It's like the Pope. It's like Pharaoh, right? How does this manifest? Because of what the Arabs, Ishmael, have done and will do, are doing and will do to the Jews, They will be the cause of the Jews to cry out, and then as a result of this cry, Ishmael, God will hear. So, back to measure for measure. The Holy One, blessed be He, handled the Egyptians measure for measure, and He killed all their firstborn. As said in Psalms 136:10, to Him who smote the Egyptians with their firstborn, for His kindness is eternal. Wait, He just smote all the first, but His kindness, you see, judgment, kindness. It always goes like that. If they didn't do what they did, they would not have received that. They chose to do this, and that's why they get what's coming to them. But also, because they chose to do this, Israel came out of a fiery furnace, if you will, a cauldron. Inseparable. Well, ideally. So, judgment for Egypt, mercy for Israel. And why measure for measure? Pharaoh was warned, specifically warned. World, pay attention. Exodus 4:22. You could read this in the English too. And you shall say to Pharaoh, so said the Lord, that is the Yud Kei Vav Kei, my firstborn son is Israel. Firstborn son, Israel. If you mess with my firstborn son, you won't have any. All right? And so it was. Well, firstborn sons. I'm sorry. I need this. But not only that. See, we all know what it's written about. We know what it's written about in the Torah. Why does Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer not bring that verse as a reference? The answer is because our text comes to show yet another element of this judgment. Listen again to the verse. To him who smote the Egyptians with their firstborn, for his kindness is eternal. Lemekei Mitzrayim bivchoreihem. Egypt was smitten by the hands of their firstborn sons. Bivechoreihem. The Bechorot were the ones who were the instrument of smiting the Egyptians, in addition to God. When word got out that the God of the Hebrews, the one who caused them all these 9 plagues thus far, is going to kill all the firstborn sons of Egypt, they, the firstborn of Egypt, rose up and began to come to Pharaoh's palace to try and kill Pharaoh. Let them go or we're all dead. So what do we have to lose right now? So, and for the sake of releasing Israel. What does this show us? That the Egyptians believed in God, or at least in his abilities. It's not that they're like, he's our God and the only God. But clearly this God of the Hebrew is way more powerful than even our strongest God, which is the Lamb God, which Israel ended up eating and wiping the fat off their lips. They saw that everything that Moses prophesied had come to pass. And time after time, when Pharaoh would not release them, it became increasingly worse for his own people, to the point of complete and utter collapse on every aspect of Egyptian life. As it was, so it will be. Release them, God said, or it will be very, very bad for you. What once was is still to come, and there's nothing new under the sun. When Israel went out of Egypt, what did the Holy One, blessed be He, do? He tossed all their disgusting engraved images and shattered them, as said in Numbers 33:4. ומצרים מקברים את אשר היכה אדוני בהם כל בכור ובאלוהיהם עשה אדוני שפטים. And the Egyptians were busy burying because the Lord had struck down their firstborn and had wrought vengeance against their what? Deities. Shvatim, the little idols or the false gods that they took. As the plague kept on coming, one after the other, it destroyed the false gods of the Egyptians, weakening them and their hold over Israel. The last one, of course, was, like we said, the lamb god of Egypt, as Israel were called to slaughter lambs, grill them in the street, and eat them up. This is to signify what? To the Egyptians, that Israel were not afraid of them or of their lamb god, showing complete faith in God in the face of imminent danger. What, you're going to just take our God and slaughter it and eat it and burn it, barbecue it and eat it over there? Oh no, the Egyptians would have killed him any other day, right? We are not afraid. Here's what we do to your lamb, God. We eat it. Okay, and this was a command directly from, our God, the God of the universe. So, now since we're still in the same chapter as the one from several weeks ago, from the last Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, we are going to discuss another opinion of who Moses saved, then later who threatened him, and this kind of continues off of that. So we're coming to another section right now. Rabbi Yossi says, the Egyptians would defile Israel and their wives with them. So you should know that a son of the son of Dan, this is what our text says, the son of Dan married a woman from his tribe, and her name was Shlomit bat Dibri. This we can also see in Leviticus 24:11. And the son of the Israelite woman pronounced the divine name and cursed. So they brought him to Moses. His mother name was Shlomit, the daughter of Dibri, of the tribe of Dan. So she is from the tribe of Dan. On her wedding night, it says, some Egyptian taskmasters came to her and killed her husband, and she conceived. Okay, so in other words, this, like we said, this is but one opinion. I've given an entire class just about this event and what took place. So it's important to have all these different opinions as to how to look at these things. Nevertheless, a general consensus, like we said, is that she had an ongoing relationship with Egyptian men while her husband was at work. The hint as far as she is concerned is in the name itself, in her name, Shlomit, the daughter of Dibri. Shalomit, the one who says hello, hello, the one who says hello to everyone, the one who talks to everyone, and the one who gossips. What is Dibri? Dibri comes from my speech, dibur. Dibur is speech, ledaber, to talk, to speak, hinting to us that she was indeed a gossiper. And as we know, when people are loose with their lips, they end up sowing strife between brothers, speaking lashon hara, cause so many others to sin, and on and on and on. Mind you, she was the only one of Israel that did this. The only one, harlotry, lashon hara, just her and only her. That's why her name is mentioned, to the shame of her and her tribe in that instance. And so a person with such a low moral state, such a questionable character, it is no wonder the Torah mentions her, her father's house, and her tribe by name, and not for the sake of anything but to reveal her shame. Because we might only think that she was only an ongoing adulteress, but you have to understand, where there is one bad character trait, there's always another and another and another. Okay, especially when it comes to Ben Adam Lechavoro, between man and his fellow man. We also know that there were 4 things that stood to Israel's credit in Egypt. Now, it's funny that here we're talking about 4 in later on in this chapter, not in this class, in 2 classes from now. We're gonna talk about 3, but I'm mentioning the 4. The 4th will be mentioned there. Anyway, this is all related. Like I said, it's all one chapter. This is, what is this? Chapter part E of chapter 48. You'll see. All right, so 4 things. 1, they did not worship idols. 2, they did not change their names. 3, they did not change their dress. 4, they were not sexually immoral. Slightly different, but we'll get to it. That's one of the instances. So that's one that that the case we see of the entire generation, only her, she's the only one that partook in any of these things, in all of them actually. And at the end of the day, if there is even a doubt, we can always look at the fruit. Okay, I didn't do any of these things. Show us the fruit of your labor. Show us your boy. Let's see what he did, right? In this case, your offspring, and everything follows the seed, says Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. If it is sweet, it will be sweet. If it is bitter, it will be bitter. In other words, where it comes from. And here is the proof, like we read, when Israel went of Egypt, he, the son, began to curse and cause a ruckus. Okay? And the son of the Israelite woman, that one, pronounced the divine name and cursed. So yes, this guy who pronounced the name of the woman of God and cursed it, yes, he was a Jew because his mother was a Jew, but his father, no, right? No good. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like this all the time, but considering what happened and how it happened, of course nothing good would come of it. Like we said, Moses saw The Egyptian, the very one who did this, he says nothing good is going to come out of him. That's what it said. Vaifen ko vako, he looked this way and that. Ko, kafhe, 25, meaning he looked into Binah, 50, and he saw down generations, nothing good came from you and nothing good will come from you, and he killed him there, and here's his son. So it means, like all things, like at the root of the matter, that's what we have to look at always, at where it came from and how it came about. For instance, the ideal time for a Jewish husband and wife to be together, ichud, is after midnight Friday night. After there's a certain time, it moves with the sun. But yes, after midnight, what is considered biblical midnight on Friday night, not worldly midnight, but according to our times, which constantly shift throughout the days. This, of course, also means that the husband and wife must be properly separated for the allotted time according to the woman's cycle, and then an additional 7 days of purity, after which the woman dunks in a mikveh, and she is pure and then ready for her husband. Okay, so ideal time for what? To draw the highest souls from the heavens into the physical unification. What you're doing over here has every effect from there. So when both parties are right, with the right focus and purity, and at the right time, we have auspicious times for everything in our religion, in our faith. You draw the highest souls, and there is no higher than specifically Friday night, creating an appropriate body to house this holiness. The more the couple takes care, the higher the soul. But when a couple falters with ritual purity, which is in the 5 books of Moses, then the soul they draw down can be rotten to its core. If it is sweet, it will be sweet. If it is bitter, it is bitter. Unfortunately, today, at least 50% of all the Jews, I don't know, forget about the world, but here in Israel, they don't keep to any of these things. So the souls that they draw down is a problem. And again, if you look at the street in Israeli society today and what goes on and the kind of hate and destruction and the godlessness that is here, particularly from a side that is, we'll call it secular. Again, I'm not even putting it on them. Their parents, parents, and so on and so forth. That's why you have this strife right now. If everyone was good, holy, pure, and this is how they brought children into the world, these kids would then be good, and so on and so forth. Deuteronomy 28:18 is an allusion to this. If a man has a wayward or rebellious son who does not obey his father or his mother, and this is how the rebellious son is made, exactly by not doing or doing what we said, and they chasten him, and he still does not listen to them, this is one of the outcomes of such a union. Look in the States right now, right? You can't tell your kids anything because kids have more rights than their parents. Oy vavoy. So it's not only an Israel problem. Here it's magnified because we got the Torah to follow. The rest of the world, they don't necessarily need this ritual of purity, right? But then look at the kids and the next generation that is produced. So this is a global issue, right? It's an issue of humanity. So also, at the same time, during the act itself, whatever goes through the parent's mind, like we said, is what they will instill in the child. There's a story in the Talmud, I forgot where, but there was one of the, who was it? It was an African king who, he and his wife bore a white child. So the king was going to kill his wife, clearly he's not mine, but he went to a sage, I forgot which rabbi it was, and the rabbi said, tell me something, do you have white marble statues in your bedroom? And he says, like around your bed? He goes, yeah, I do. He goes, okay, y'all been staring at the statues. Whatever you look at, that is what you are going to produce. That's how Jacob got the spotted sheep. How did he know that? He put the sticks with the spots. So when the sheep were coming together, what they were staring at is what they would produce. So what do we look at? We look at certain, anyway, I don't need to say over here what we're looking at, but basically, in our mind's eye, if you will. pure thoughts, the right focus, the right kavanot to draw down the holiest of souls to bring them to this world. Because if not, yeah, you got to try really hard not to do that. So, now take a man who is not only not a Jew, but Moses saw that no good, like we said, no good will ever come from him or his seed, that he has no redemption in this world, and that it would seem that his only function was to harm and damage what he caused, right? And this comes from a willing married woman committing adultery, tarnishing the name of Israel. And that's when you get something like this, and the son of the Israelite woman pronounced the divine name and cursed, so they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shlomit, the daughter of Dibri, of the tribe of Dan. That's what happens. Everything put into the child is wrong, so to speak, and no good will come of him. Now, unfortunately, like the nations, Israel too has many, mamzerim. These are bastards, right? Bastard children, and the sages discuss them. Here in Israel too, a lot of Israelis, they don't even have kosher weddings. So you have kids out of wedlock. They're not considered mamzerim. But again, Hashem Yishmo. Okay, so they are, nevertheless, they are still part of Israel, just like the son of the Israelite woman and the Egyptian man. They're still part of Israel. They still must obey the laws of God, but laws very specific as who they can marry. Okay? Just because a person is a mamzer, it does not mean that they don't have redemption. Not at all. All this means is that their trials are more difficult than most. They have been given a very strong and willful spirit because they come from the side of Tum'ah, from the Sitra Achra, from the left side. Very strong, very powerful. Call it the dark side. Y'all seen Star Wars? You know, the Jedi decided the Force. Everybody uses the Force, but the Jedis are calm and cool and no problem. They're not supposed to get angry. They just, everything is, and they're all like Zen. The Sith, if you will, the dark side, they have that rage. They engulf themselves with rage and with hate. That's why echad le'echad on the surface, if they're on the same level, I can't believe I'm like this, but it makes sense. The dark side is more powerful than the light. But once you have the seasoned veterans, the Yodas, if you will, it doesn't matter where the darkness comes from. They can't overpower that because everything essentially really does come from the light. In other words, even judgment comes from mercy. Other classes. But you get the idea, I hope. So, should they properly, the mamzerim, apply themselves to Torah and a good life, they can be incredibly powerful and a force of good and spiritually elevated more than most, more than even tzaddikim. You have to understand. It's if you're born into that darkness and you make a choice to overcome that, you are so much more powerful because on the light they never had these kind of trials. This is a state of reality that people cannot control if this is their state. In fact, in the Mishnah, Masechet Horayot 3:8, it says the following: a mamzer who is a Torah scholar precedes a high priest who is an ignoramus, as Torah wisdom surpasses all else. So you can do really bad or you can do really good. Everybody has free will in this world, and everybody, no matter who they are, where they came from, they can choose to turn it all around, doing their best to overcome the trial that has been given to them specifically. But if they do not, like God told Cain in Genesis 4:7, Cain was the literal son of Satan. The literal son of Satan. And God told him what? For if you will improve, you will ascend. If you do not improve, however, at the entrance, sin is lying, waiting. And to you it is longing, but you can rule over it. And when you rule over it, you will rule over it. And you will take its power. But the entrance to what? What? The entrance to what? Sin is lying in what? The entrance to the womb. The moment we come out into this world, sin is quite literally everywhere, whether we see it or not. This is what this is, right? And if Cain can be redeemed. Now, again, if you want to think about it, is Cain not a mamzer? Adam and Eve. That kid was not Adam's. The original mamzer right there. Who was the original murderer, right? And yet if he can be redeemed, do we think that we cannot be redeemed, whoever we may be? You think God doesn't love you because of the deeds of your parents and this is how you are and you came to be? Oh, I'm in a negative state, I'm in a this, I'm in a that. Anybody can overcome. There's all this conversation in America. It's nature versus nurture. And then we see people growing up in poor neighborhoods and what happens over there. But then we see a few sparks that actually come out of there. How did you make it? Well, I didn't sling drugs. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I made choices to go to school, to finish school, to be an upstanding citizen, not to harm my fellow man. And now this person can actually help other people. It's all about free will and your personal choice. Im tetiv se'et. If you choose to do better, you will be lifted. You will be lifted. God will personally lift you. But you have to choose. So, God probably loves you more because of the negative state that he placed you in. As he would never give you a trial that you could not handle. More difficult than your average bear, for sure. But then again, we have no idea what anyone else is going through and where they come from in this world and especially in the spiritual world. So for that, we can't exactly judge, right? We see this chaos everywhere and we say, okay, it's not your fault. It's not your parents' fault. It's not anybody's fault. But what is our fault? It's only our responsibility, the choices we make after that. Are you doing good by your fellow man? Are you doing right by God? Which is essentially good for you. So, like we said, but we don't know. No one's destiny is done unless they choose it to be. So, to my fellow human beings who have had a hard upbringing, who have been betrayed by parents, teachers, preachers, to those who struggle to lift their noses out of the puddle that they are lying in face down, to those who have all but given up hope. And guys, really just hold on, because it's about to get so much crazier, yes, than it is right now. As Rabbi Nachman said, if you believe that something can be spoiled, then you must by default believe that it can be rectified. So please, take this message of hope and understand that God does in fact love you more than you could possibly love yourself. So we're almost done. The world is about to implode. We need to hang on just a little while longer. One day at a time, that is our focus. One day at a time, one step at a time. Never give up hope, for if you will improve, you will ascend. And that's today's class. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, thank you for your patience. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye.